If you knew in your core that love and acceptance were a given, perfectly loved, perfectly accepted, there's nothing you need to do to get it. You already have it. It really ultimately releases you to play. Hey guys, my name is Jonathan Hartog. I'm a mental health therapist in Littleton, Colorado. And can I say your name? Benjamin and I are going to do a few of these videos. I'm not sure who's going to watch them, but my wife said that she would. So at least this is for Angie. I have been a therapist for 16 years. And as I've been working with people, especially over the last probably 5-6 years, I really think that where I found my sweet spot has been with the millennial generation. So if you're between 25 and 40 years old, you fall in that generation. And that's really the group of people that I really have been able to help the most significantly. And a lot of the folks that I work with come from a Christian background, and so have grown up in pretty religious homes. And when they come to me, I can tell by the way that a lot of things that they were taught, the way that they were raised, that there's a lot that people come in and they're trying to untangle. They're tired, they're exhausted, they're confused. They have a lot of questions about God and religion and like the whole thing, but there's not a very clear sense of who they are. I'm going to give a little bit of background from my own life and story that I think begins to play into this. I grew up as well in a Christian home. My father is a pastor, and he has been for my entire life and still is. And I have 4 siblings, but a lot of the way that we were raised was pretty traditionally and very conservatively. And so I was very much a rule follower. I played by the rules. I didn't do things that you weren't supposed to do. I didn't drink. I didn't smoke, do drugs, any of that kind of stuff. And I did the things that I was supposed to do. I was in church every time I was supposed to be in church. I read my Bible, had a quiet time every day, and did all of the right things. And then I went to college and I got a degree that was essentially in youth ministry. Angie, my wife's name is Angie. We had been married for about, I think it was about 5 years. And we had gone to this really little church that they had called me out to start a youth ministry in this church. And when we got to the church, I think there were a total of 7 kids in the whole church, junior high and high school. I think what they were really wanting me to do was to have a Bible study with them. But I had a lot of experience throughout college and then some after working in really large youth ministries. And when we left the church, there were about 150 kids that had come into the youth ministry, and it was a huge success by that standard. But we had kind of gotten to the end of that, and I internally was just completely exhausted. I had done all of the right things for the first 25 years of my life. I hadn't done any of the wrong things, and I was depressed. I don't know that I would go so far as to say that I was suicidal, but I did ask myself like the question a lot, like what is the meaning and purpose in any of this? And like, and I knew that I couldn't live the next 50, 60 years of my life just doing the same thing, because I was 25 and I felt like, I literally remember like wondering in my brain, like how people ever got to be 70 or 80 years old, like, because I was so tired of just life and tired of doing everything. And my wife and I ended up coming out to Colorado and doing a 2-week counseling intensive with a man out here. And during that intensive, and looking really more deeply at the matters of my own heart, something in me really started to come alive. The best way of saying it is I really kind of got out of my head and I started to connect to something inside of me. And we ended up leaving the church and going to Seattle, where I went to graduate school and got my master's degree in counseling. Now, with that being said, I never ever had the intention of actually becoming a therapist. I wanted to go to that program because there was so much that was coming alive in me, and I wanted to just continue that process. And I thought and felt like the best way to do that was to go to a school that was all about what was happening in me. And I went and got a master's degree really because I was trying to figure out what the hell was wrong with me. So that's a little bit of a just a snapshot of how I got into this. But something like a couple things that I've really noticed in my practice over the years is that a lot of people, especially that grew up in Christian homes, they in many ways grew up in a similar way that I did, where a lot of Christianity was about obedience. They know what to do and they know what not to do, but it's not very connected to the heart. And there's a verse in the book of Proverbs, I think it's Proverbs 22:6 maybe. It says, "Train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." And the way that I have always heard that taught, the way I've always heard that translated, has a lot to do with teach your kids about Jesus, teach them right from wrong, and teach them to be good people. And when they're old, they'll be good people. And that, first of all, clearly doesn't actually work, because I know a lot of people that grew up like I did and they haven't turned out to be good people at all. But what that verse really means, if you begin to dig into it, is every single one of us is very unique, a very unique individual. My wife and I have 4 sons, and they are so different. They have very different temperaments. They have very different personalities. Just to use my older two and as an example, my oldest son, he wanted to be around people. Like even before he could talk, my wife would take him to like story time at the library. And there was this one time where he was sitting next to her, or like right in front of her, and there was a little girl sitting next to him that had this like blonde hair, and he kind of like turned and he looked at her and he started running his fingers through her hair. And my wife leaned forward and she grabbed his hand and she said, "Honey, you can't touch her. You don't know her." And so he put his hand down. Then a few seconds later, he reached back up and he started running his fingers through her hair again. And he always there were so many different things about him as a kid that you could just tell he was just very extroverted, very social, and we could see that in him from a really young age. Fast forward a few years, when his brother, our second son, was about a year old as well, we went to a church one Sunday that we had never gone to before. And we dropped him off in the nursery, and we introduced him and introduced ourselves to the nursery workers, and then we got him situated, and we kind of like set him up in sort of set him up in the corner, and said goodbye to him, and he was fine. He didn't cry or anything like that. We left, and we went to church, and we came back an hour later, and he was sitting in the same spot. And we asked the nursery workers, how did he do? And they said he did great. He didn't move the entire time. So a 1-year-old boy was sitting basically in a corner the entire time, just observing everything that was going on. But he wasn't actually like interacting with the other kids. He was just observing it. And to this day, these boys being 18 and 20, there are still like characteristics that are very similar to when they were 1 year old that we can see over the course of time that have remained true to who they are. Our second son is far more of an introvert. He's very bright, very intelligent. He studies things, and he's always taking in information. And our oldest son is far more like kind of happy-go-lucky, and he kind of just rolls with how things are, just kind of goes with the flow. And it's a beautiful quality about him. And our second son, it's a really beautiful quality of him. But my point is that they really, in many ways, came out like that. That wasn't something that we taught them. It was just the way that they were. And so going back to that verse in Proverbs, to train up a child in the way that he should go, what it really means is study your kids, study who they are, learn what makes them tick, learn what they need, learn what they don't need, and understand them, study them. They're in Scripture it says that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, that we are knit together in our mother's womb. And that's a very intricate metaphor that means that you were very intentionally made, you were very intentionally created. And so as a parent with 4 different boys who are 4 completely different human beings, our job is to study each one of them from the time that they're young as they grow up, and to help to give them a deep understanding of who they are, and then to train them up in the specific direction that they should go, so that when they're old, they will know who they are, and there'll be a deep sense of their personal individual identity, and then they won't depart from it. So my point in bringing that up right out of the gate is that far more the way that I was raised, and a lot of the people that come in to see me were raised, is more of a very general love God, do the right thing, don't do the wrong thing, and then you're going to turn out okay. And so I have a lot of people that come to see me, and they really don't have, they're very confused about their own identity. And so part of the work that I do with people is beginning to move into their story and help them to begin to recover who they are. So in many ways, counseling can be like almost like reparenting, in helping people to go back into their life and into their story, and to figure out the stories that really began to form the direction that they've taken in life. So I'll probably talk more about that again in a minute. But I'm going to switch gears here for a second. I think a lot of Christianity that people are raised in is really ultimately rooted or based in fear. The fear of hell, the fear of losing favor with God, the fear of whatever. I mean, hell is probably the big one, because like living in eternal torment will scare anybody. And so literally a lot of Christianity is trying to scare the hell out of people. When the gospel is rooted in love and not in fear, it changes everything. And in the book of 1 John says that perfect love casts out fear. When Christianity is based in fear, it isn't based in love, and it's completely backwards. And so it doesn't actually free people. It keeps people held in bondage. When I ask people, why did Jesus come? Most people say that he came, some version of he came and he did miracles, and then he ultimately came to die on the cross for our sins so that we can go to heaven and be with him forever. Like essentially that's the message at the root of it. Well, that's not why Jesus said that he came. When Jesus came, before his ministry began, he opened up the scrolls to what is now Isaiah 61. He said, the Spirit of the Sovereign Lord is upon me. He has anointed me to preach good news, to free prisoners from captivity, to heal the brokenhearted. He came to proclaim freedom for those who are in captivity and who are broken and in bondage. So Jesus came for your freedom and for my freedom. He came to free us. He came to set us free. He came to set our hearts free. He came so that when your heart is set free, then what that does is life all of a sudden doesn't look like a list of things that you should do or don't do, but it really ultimately releases you to play. William Paul Young, who wrote The Shack, he said at one point in time, God is in the work of healing you, not so that he can use you, but so that he can release you to play. And that's what healing does. That's what freedom in your heart does. That's what knowing you are loved does. It releases you to play. So I want to tell a story a minute. When my oldest son was a baseball player until he finished high school. When he was about 8th grade, his team they'd gone undefeated all season, and they were the #1 seed in the state championship tournament. They had gotten to the second to the last game, so the semifinal game before the championship. So the other team had the last at bat. They were the home team, and they were up to bat. My son's team was up 6-3. They had the bases loaded with no outs, and it looked like they were going to lose the game really quickly. And Leaf, my son, started pitching, and he pitched 4 balls in a row. So he walked the first batter. So now the score 6-4. Bases are still loaded, still no outs. The coach called time, and he came out to the mound, and he took the ball out of my son's hand, and he put his hand on his shoulder, and he just talked to him. And then he gave him the ball back. He patted him on the back, and he walked off the field. Immediately, right after that, strike 1, strike 2, strike 3, batter was out. I think the next play was like a ground out, and then the next play was a pop out. And within a matter of 3 minutes, we had 3 outs. The game was over. 2 hours later, they went and they won the championship. After the game was over, Leaf came up to us, and he had this huge smile on his face. And I asked him, I said, hey, what did Coach Mitch, is what his name is? I said, what did Coach Mitch say to you? And he said, he looked at me and he just said, Leaf, you're trying. Quit trying and just play. You're trying to win, you're trying to do good, you're trying to do a really good job, you're trying to do this perfectly, you're trying not to lose, you're trying to do the right thing, and trying not to do the wrong thing because you don't want to blow it. You don't want to blow the game here. But you know what? Stop all that and let all the pressure go. Doesn't matter if we win, doesn't matter if we lose, doesn't matter what the outcome is. Just play. Just have fun and play the game. There was something about that shifted something huge in Leaf's mind, and he was able to let go of the pressure and just do what he does. That's what I really believe that God is doing in our lives, is he's like, don't worry about the outcome. There's no pressure. Don't worry about doing it right. Don't worry about doing it wrong. Like, what is inside of you? And like Paul Young was saying, God isn't working in your life and healing you so that he can use you for some purpose, but he's really doing that because he wants to release you to go and play and go live your life. There's a story in the New Testament about Jesus, and Jesus. We know very little about the first 30 years of his life. Of course, we know about the very beginning. I mean, the Christmas story. And then there's a story that's put in there about when he was like 10 years old and he went into the temple and taught in the temple. But then from then on, like, there's very little that we actually know from the Bible until he's about 30 years old. And at this point in the story, Jesus is standing by a river, and he's waiting in a line to get down to the river to be baptized by John the Baptist. There's more to the story, but he baptizes him, and Jesus comes out of the water, and the way that it reads in Scripture is that the Spirit of the Lord descended on him like a dove, and he heard his Father's voice. And his Father said, Jesus, you are my Son, and I am so pleased with you. What I hear, what I read is, Jesus, you haven't done anything yet. You haven't performed any miracles. You certainly haven't gone to the cross and died. You haven't done anything yet. And you're getting ready to step into some of the most difficult, some of the most challenging years of your life. But this is why you've come. and this is about to happen. Before you do anything, I want to remind you who you are. You are my son. I'm your father, and I love you with all of my heart. You are the pride of my life. You're the apple of my eye. I could not be more proud of who you are, not what you've done or what you haven't done, but just you're my son. And like, I could not possibly be more proud of you. Now go and live the next 3 years of your life, not trying to get that, but living out of that. You're living out of your identity. You're not living trying to find your identity. And I really believe that if you and I knew at the core of our being that we were loved, it doesn't matter what you do, doesn't matter what you don't do, that you are absolutely perfectly loved. Now go live your life. That would change the game for all of us. And so what most of us do is we spend our whole life trying to get that, and then we adapt, and we're like chameleons. We adapt to our environment. We become who we think people need us to be to get the thing that we want the most, that we already have. We just don't know that we have it. Our youngest son, Knox, he's 11 now. When he was maybe like 3 years old, it was November 1st, so day after Halloween. We had taken them trick-or-treating the night before, and so he had a big bag of candy in his room. He was still sleeping in his crib, in his baby crib, but he could get in and out of his crib on his own. And one morning, or the morning after Halloween, November 1st, my wife woke up really early, and she started walking down our stairs, and she heard the TV on. She didn't know anybody else was up, and she came and she turned around the corner, and Knox was standing in front of the TV watching a cartoon with chocolate coming down the sides of his face, and he was completely naked, buck naked, eating candy, watching a cartoon on TV. He didn't go to bed like that. We knew that. He had his pajamas on when he had gone to bed, and so we weren't sure exactly what had happened, but she said, Knox, and he did not take his eyes off that. He's staring at the TV this whole time. He didn't look at her. He didn't look at her one time. And he's staring at the TV, and he just says, yeah. And she said, did somebody tell you that you could eat candy before breakfast? With his cheeks full of candy, chocolate coming down his face, he goes, Mom, can I have candy before breakfast? And she says, okay, you can continue. But here's what I think happened. He woke up, he climbed out of his crib, he took off his pajamas, and he was probably, I assume, getting ready to get dressed. And somewhere in that transition, he remembered that he had a bag of candy, and he went and got the candy, and then went downstairs, and he's watching TV all by himself, eating candy, and he is completely oblivious to the fact that he is completely naked. And there's no embarrassment, there's no shame, there's not even really an awareness of it. And that there's something that's just absolutely beautiful about that. Like he had never experienced shame. He wouldn't even have understood what that word meant. And so he was living in shalom, peace, joy, no shame. He was just living. He was just him. He was a kid, and he lived, and he played, and he did what kids do. At some point, though, for every single one of us, shame enters into the picture in a variety of different ways, but all of a sudden that shalom that we experience is completely shattered. It's completely obliterated. It's like a bomb gets thrown into the middle of that, and all of a sudden you know what shame is, and you know that you're naked, and you know that you need to clothe yourself, and you know that you need to cover yourself, and you know that you need to act a certain way and be a certain way and do things a certain way to be loved and accepted. And so people develop all kinds of styles of relating and ways of, like, whether it's to act a certain way or look a certain way or be a certain way to find acceptance, to find love, to find something that they've been looking for ever since the shalom was shattered, when they experienced trauma in the first place. And then people spend the rest of their lives trying to find something that they've actually had their entire life, but they experienced it, but then it was broken and it was lost. And then they spend the rest of their lives trying to find that again. But they don't believe in their heart that they're loved, that they're accepted, and so then the whole life becomes about trying to find that. I want to read that. There's a quote I want to read from Brennan Manning. He said, do you believe that the God of Jesus loves you beyond worthiness and unworthiness, beyond fidelity and infidelity, that he loves you in the morning sun and in the evening rain, that he loves you when your intellect denies it, your emotions refuse it, your whole being rejects it? Do you believe that God loves without condition or reservation and loves you this moment as you are and not as you should be? What I would say is, if you knew and believed in your core that that was true, that you were loved beyond worthiness, unworthiness, good, bad, right, wrong, that you were just loved. If you believed that, it would give you an unbelievable freedom, no pressure. Like when I talked about the baseball game, like no pressure to win or lose, just be you and play the game. It would give you an unbelievable freedom to enter into an exploration of who are you and what do you love and what do you hate, what brings your heart alive, what turns you on, what turns you off, what do you gravitate, like a million different questions. And that's why, even going back to the very beginning, train up a child in the way that he should go. I really believe as a parent, like the two biggest jobs that I have are love my kids, and out of that love to see them, to hear them, to find them, to study them, and help to guide them in the specific direction that they should go, so that when they're old, they'll know who they are, and then they won't leave that. Well, very few people have that. So just circling back to the beginning, when you grow up in a home and you're taught good and bad, right and wrong, like I'm not saying that all of that is like bad. I'm just saying that what we really need is guidance. We need, from the time we're really little, we need to be studied, and we need to be heard and listened to, and then we need to be guided in the direction that we should go. I meet hardly anybody who had that as a kid. And so then almost everybody that comes into my office is just very lost. There's not a sense of like, I know who I am and I know what I'm about. I know what my life is about. And I wake up every morning with a desire and passion in my heart to go live the life that's mine to live. Like, how many people do you know who actually live their life that way? That they would actually like go to bed at night with this deep sense of like, if I died tomorrow doing what I'm going to go do, it would be worth my death, because I believe so deeply in who I am and in what I'm called to, that my life is actually worthy of death. And so if I die doing it, it's okay, because like that, I know who I am and I'm living my calling, and I would die for it. Like, how many people do you know who live their life that way? I don't know hardly anybody that lives that way, and I believe that that's actually the way that we're called to live. And so then people come in here and they have no idea who they are. They don't know who they are. And so then a big part of my job is going back into people's lives and into their stories and figuring out where they got lost, figuring out where their heart was broken. I'm on a mission to help people to find and to recover who they really are, and then they begin to go live their life, and they begin to play, and they begin to experience like the joy and the delight and the freedom that Jesus talked about in Isaiah 61. I've come to give you freedom. I've come to give you life. I've come to set you free. And that's ultimately what I want to do with people, because I think that that's ultimately ultimately what I care about is releasing people from a captivity that I have known and that I've experienced, and I've also experienced a freedom and a life and joy, and that's the path that I want for my own life, and that's the path that I want for people that come see me. So for now, thank you for if you watched any or all of this, I really appreciate it. Thank you, Benjamin, for all of your time and recording and doing this, and we'll see you next time.